Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Levinthal. This video is for our Bio 182 lab video presentation assignment. The goal of this project was to locate a primary news story alongside its referenced primary literature article and compare how mainstream news outlets interpret scientific data for the general populace. The question I seek to answer is how accurately do mainstream media outlets report scientific data? Do they simply quote the source material word for word, or do they simplify the information so anyone can understand it? Maybe they simply ignore scientific data in the hopes that people won't notice. These are the questions I seek to answer in today's presentation. The article I am discussing today is published by Fox News. It details NASA's effort to help develop a more humane method of tracking sea otter populations. Previous tracking devices were bulky and expensive, leading to the new device being much smaller and cheaper in design. The device is designed to go around the animal's hind flippers and is made to be durable yet harmless towards the otters. The photo shown is from the Monterey Bay Aquarium's website and simply depicts what the device looks like. The primary literature article comes from NASA AMES. They announce in the article that they are working alongside the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, and Northern California's Monterey Bay Aquarium on the project. The most interesting aspect of this article, however, is the information that is not covered in the Fox News report. The article by Fox News is essentially a reworded version of NASA's own article, even using the same reference quotes and images. Right up until the final paragraph of the primary literature, the Fox News article covers all the same information with nearly identical wording throughout. However, once NASA begins to talk about the role sea otters play in the ecosystem, the articles begin to deviate from one another. Here is an example of the Fox News article using identical images and quotes as the primary literature article. While it does make sense that they would use an identical caption when referencing the same image, this copy and reword mentality is present throughout the entirety of the article. However, complications arise once the news article begins to deviate away from the primary one. The Fox News article does mention that sea otters are a keystone species. However, it refrains from explaining what that actually means. Instead, they link to a separate webpage on Monterey Bay Aquarium's website. This leads to an unrelated two-sentence explanation detailing information about the average southern sea otter population and a very surface-level explanation of their role in the ecosystem. The primary literature article goes far more in depth as to what being a keystone species actually entails, going into detail as to how changes in the sea otter population could lead to a cascading impact. They explain how sea urchins are a primary food source for sea otters and that sea urchins consume kelp. Thus, without sea otters, kelp forests could end up being depleted by the increased sea urchin population. Here is an example of how each article presents the information that sea otters are a keystone species. The primary literature goes far more in depth as to the role that sea otters play in the ecosystem. The article explains how kelp forests can become totally depleted by sea urchin populations due to the absence of major predators. Alternatively, the Fox News article merely refers to sea otters as a keystone species without providing a definition as to what that actually means. They mention that sea otters contribute to the health of coastal kelp forests, however they fail to explain how this relationship actually functions. While the information presented in the Fox News article is mostly accurate, it is simply reworded information taken from the primary source. In some cases, the information is even taken word for word from the primary article. Any information that isn't reworded fails to properly explain the scientific concepts that they are referencing. One interesting thing to note is that right before the Fox News article begins to discuss the ecological role that sea otters play, they link to a separate Fox News article discussing how a small group of Asian sea otters tested positive for COVID-19. The first paragraph of this article mentions how sea otters contracted COVID-19 and then immediately state that they are fully recovered and were only exhibiting mild symptoms. I also wanted to mention that this article is only 2 paragraphs long. Here are all the images used throughout this presentation, as well as links to their original sources. Both articles were absent of any graphs that could be used to interpret data. As such, none are cited within this presentation. Here are citations for all the articles used throughout the presentation, as well as the Monterey Bay Aquarium page referenced within the Fox News article. This video was created by Daniel Levinthal within the context of Bio 182 General Biology for Majors at Arizona State University in the spring 2022 semester.